Welcome to the Real Freedom Podcast, where we inspire you to pursue your passion to gain time and financial freedom through opportunities in real estate. I'm your host, Mike Swenson. Let's get some real freedom together. All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Real Freedom Podcast, where we talk about building time and financial freedom through opportunities in real estate. And so today we're going to be talking more about larger multifamily apartment space. And so we've got John Casmon here. And just a quick bio about John. He is a real estate entrepreneur that's partnered with folks to invest over $100 million into apartments, balance between Midwest and Southeast for those folks that are kind of wondering where he's investing. And we'll talk about that today too. Also consult active multifamily investors to help them grow their business. You host your own podcast, the Multifamily Insights Podcast, and the co-creator of the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit. Prior to being a full-time investor, you worked in corporate America, overseeing marketing campaigns for General Motors, Nike, and Coors Light. So some of the big accounts. So welcome, John. We're so excited to have you on the show.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me. I appreciate that warm introduction today.
Let's go ahead and get started, John. And maybe you just want to share how you moved from that corporate space into real estate. What were you looking for that made you want to make that leap?
Yeah, I mean, listen, my time frame, you go back, I started in corporate America, in around 2004 is when I graduated. So I worked about 15 years in corporate America. And ultimately what happened is I worked at General Motors as one of my, basically went through a couple of different agencies, got hired at GM back in 2007. And I was super excited for this opportunity. And I worked on some great campaigns. But if you're looking at your calendar there, 2007 to 2011 is when I was there. Well, that was the same time we went through bankruptcy. And I remember distinctly watching some of my peers, and we had a round of layoffs. And one of the guys, he got let go. And I think he was caught a little surprised by it and left a voicemail. He mentioned that he was at the company for 22 years. He was diabetic, wasn't sure how he was going to pay for his insulin. And, his plan was to retire from this company that had supported him for 22 years. And he was a loyal employee. And he fell short there. He got let go before he could even, take early retirement. So he just was flat out let go. And he had no plan B. And I just remember like that running through my mind for like weeks, if not months. And I had a lot of time going through bankruptcy, coming out of bankruptcy, looking for jobs, trying to figure out my next move. And as I was thinking about this more, I realized that no matter what, if I just went from job to job, I was always going to be in the same position, worried about my future, worried about getting let go or fired, or worried about the politics, not being someone's guy, worried about being passed on a promotion. And I just realized that, I didn't want to live the next 20, 30 years of my corporate professional life like that, just worried, worried and anxious. And a lot of my peers, my bosses, like the directors, everybody I was looking up to, they weren't happy. They had that anxiety. They had to deliver. Everything was urgent, right? Everything was, if it didn't happen, there was going to be heads to roll. And it just felt like every day was like that. And I'm like, this cannot be good for your health or your life. And that just made me think back to, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and other skills. And I was like, you know what? I want to get in real estate. I don't know how. I'm still in Detroit. I want to get in real estate. So the first step was I got to move out of Detroit, move to Chicago, went to an agency, and then I bought a house hack. My wife and I, we bought a 2-unit building, lived in one unit, rented out the other. That went really well. So we bought a 3-unit building. This was our first full rental property. So we had 3 units rented out, did really well in that property, wanted to scale. This was working. This real estate thing was working. So I bought an 8-unit building. That 8-unit building did well. Now we're in commercial real estate. But I had spent a lot of money investing into that 8-unit building. So at this point, I'm equity rich, cash flow poor. And I'm like, all right, this is working, but it's not working. Because my goal was to insulate myself from job loss. And the reality is I had equity in these projects, but I didn't have enough money coming in to stop me from losing a job or insulating myself. So that's when I started to learn about other strategies and ultimately landed on apartment syndication. Fast forward, we've helped, like you said, $100 million worth of apartment buildings. We've helped other people invest alongside of us. And that's exactly what we do today is work with busy professionals who want to ease their mind on what their options will be in the future, whether it be based on layoffs or economic downturns or anything else, just give them some passive income so they can really pursue their passions.
It's very interesting to hear your story because it comes to finding some sort of plan B. I've had people on in the past that have medical backgrounds, and it's like, hey, I've got money, I don't have time, or I don't have that freedom piece. And so there's always something, regardless of where you're at in your job, there's some piece of I don't control my own destiny, or what happens when the stock market goes down? What am I going to do? And so that plan B fuels a lot of people to at least get started. And then maybe it's a journey of, do I continue my full-time job and do this, or to eventually make that transition into full-time? And so it's a very natural evolution. And to go from 2 units to 3 units to 8 units on up, you hear a lot of folks that do that too. So I think it just shows it's possible, to go from no real estate background to where you're at today. You can do it. And I think that's the appeal too, is anybody can do it. I've interviewed people from all sorts of backgrounds where life throws them something, or they proactively decide to go pursue this. But yeah, you don't have to be full-time in real estate to get into this. And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. And I think the key there is just understanding the options, right? It doesn't matter what your situation is. And that is one of those limiting beliefs that holds so many people back, because you're thinking like, oh, well, I only have so much money, so I can't really invest in that kind of property. Or, okay, based on what I have, maybe I can only wholesale, or I can only do a flip project or something. But the truth is, there are a lot of options, lots of different strategies, and real estate has been around for a long time. And that means whatever challenge you're facing, somebody else has already faced that challenge and come up with the solution. So there are strategies from subject to deals to, again, syndications to JV partnerships to, wholesaling and all these other things. So it really just comes down to, what are you trying to achieve? What's your strength right now? Where your challenge is at? And are you willing to be a little creative and comfortable to figure out how to put a deal together so you can actually start to reach your goals?
I'd love to hear, John, that journey where you started to utilize other people's money to kind of get to that scaling point. So obviously right now, you're finding great investors that want to invest. So at that point, when you were, either at the 8 unit or starting to scale, how did that process work for you, where it's like, okay, for me to continue to grow, I need to leverage other people, and I need to leverage other people's money to produce great returns? And so how did that come about for you? And what was your mindset at that time? And what were some of the strategic steps to get out of me as an individual or my family to, let's try to scale this thing?
That's a great question. So the very first step for me was surrounding myself with the right people. And this is a huge insight. Okay. We always talk about networking, and there's a great quote that your network is your net worth, right? Networking is key because you have to surround yourself with people who are playing the game at a higher level, who are finding solutions to problems you don't even realize are problems yet. And for me, the first step was, I had a friend, person became a friend and business partner on an endeavor now. But when I first met her, she was a host of this meetup. And for me, I used to go to this meetup all the time. It was a way for me to surround myself with other real estate investors, because none of my friends invested in real estate. So this is a way for me to surround myself with other investors and to connect. Well, as the host, she was always there, and I came, pretty much every month. So we got to know each other, started talking. When I first met her, she had 3 units. About maybe 6 months later, she went from 3 to 9 units. And then about a year later, she went from 9 to 90 units. And I said, whoa, what kind of cheat code did you just unlock to go from 9 to 90 units? And she started talking to me a little bit about it. And I asked her if I could, take her to breakfast and just to learn more. And we had breakfast, and she said, well, here's what I did. She said, I had people reaching out to me who wanted to invest. I said no for a long time because I wasn't comfortable. But finally, we agreed to a partnership, and we structured the deal a certain way. But my job is to go out, find the properties, manage the properties, handle everything there. For that, I get a portion of equity, and then they invest the capital. And that's our JV deal. And it just clicked to me that if you really want to scale, you've got to be willing to partner with other people. And the reason is this: my drawback was the money in my account. So my limiting belief was you invest in real estate by yourself. You save your money, you invest your money. You don't partner with other people,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that was my mindset. Was like, well, I only have $50,000 saved, so I guess I better look at properties with the $50,000 down payment. Now we look for properties with less because we need to have reserves. But that was the mindset. And when you have partners, well, guess what? Now I'm not limited to just this $50,000 down payment property. It's a matter of how much money can I attract to go into this deal. And that just really started to open my mind. So that was the first step, was seeing somebody who was doing it
Mm-hmm.
and knowing them and talking to them and believing in them. If I would have just read this in a book or heard some dude on a podcast or a video like me right now, I
Some
probably
guy
wouldn't
named
believe it.
John.
Some guy named John, right? I wouldn't believe it. I would not have believed it. Even
Yep.
if I did believe it, it wouldn't have touched me. The reason it touched me is I knew her. I knew her when she had 3 units. We sat, we talked, we spoke, and I watched her go from 3 to 9 to 90. And that made this very, very real to me. And I think you have to surround yourself with people who can take these stories and bring them to life in a vivid, imaginative, but also attainable measure, right? And that's what she did for me. She made it very, very real. And then she laid out how she knows other people are able to scale. And she said 2 things. One, you partner with other people, or you can flip or do some other activity to generate income and then use that to invest. The very next month, I met the guy who became my mentor. As these thoughts were, percolating in my head, I sit down with this guy. I'm realizing I need to scale in different markets because I'm in Chicago at the time. The numbers in Chicago weren't working as well. I wanted to start looking at Cincinnati. I started looking at Cincinnati. I want to network with people. And they say, oh, just talk to this guy. I sit down with this guy who knew he was going to, end up becoming one of the biggest syndicators of all time. And we sit down, we have great lunch, become friends. He tells me he's got this coaching program. And I'm like, you know what? I feel like this is a missing piece that I didn't have. So I agree and say, yep, let me join this coaching program. And then I watched him grow and scale. And then I started incorporating some of those things. So networking is absolutely essential. If you are surrounding yourself with people who are playing the game at a high level, you will almost automatically start to do things at that level as well, because it's not foreign to you. And the fear, the trepidation, all that stuff goes out the window because you're watching people do it. And it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, they're going to tell you how to do it. It's like, oh, do it like this. And it's like, oh, okay, maybe it doesn't feel as complicated now. Once you know where to go and get started, you got a blueprint, it makes it so much easier. So I would say networking, mentorships, surrounding yourself with people who can help you elevate your game. That is the absolute key.
Walk me through a little bit of the life stuff that changed in terms of like what you're physically working on. So when you're doing 3 units, 3 units, 8 units, you're very actively involved in what's happening, whether it's you working on stuff or whether you're hiring people. When you get into the larger scale stuff, you work through people like property managers on site. And so for those people that are listening to this podcast that maybe they have a couple of units, maybe they're flipping and house hacking and that sort of thing, and they're thinking, where's the end game here, or kind of what's the next step from here? I'd be curious to know kind of how your life changed in terms of what you were spending your time on as you look to scale, and working through others.
That's a great question. So when I had my 2, 3, 8 unit properties, first of all, the 2 and 3 I self-managed. So I did everything there. Now, again, it's only 2 units, 3 units, but anytime there was a unit turn, well, every single step I had to handle, right? From making sure the previous tenant actually left, she gave notice or he gave notice, making sure we walk through the apartment unit, making sure that it's, broom ready, cleaned properly, making sure that contractors came through, handyman fixed anything they need to be fixed, painted, having the listings together. So I'd literally sitting there writing copy to post on the different websites to get the showings, showing the property myself, having the lease agreements ready to go, every single step, me. Okay. My wife was involved too, so we tag team everything, but a lot of it was me. So that was what we did on the 2 to 3 unit. The 8 unit, we made a conscious decision to hire third-party management. I thought I was being smart, and then my lender was like, "We're going to force you to do that anyway." I'm like, "Oh, okay," but I wanted experience managing a manager, and what I found in that was a lot of times people tell you, "Oh, it's easy, just hire a property management company." Well, there's some gaps, and it's really important to know that there's some gaps in what a property management company will do and won't do or what's going to cost you extra. I'll give you one example. On my 3 unit, well, whenever time I went to the property, I'd grab the mail. If there was, junk mail, the circulars, that kind of stuff, I'd grab it and I'd throw it out. My 8 unit, well, no one was really coming to the property that frequently. So those circulars and stuff were just piling up and nobody was there to throw it out. So I had to do it. And I'm calling my property manager company like, hey, how come you guys aren't throwing this stuff out? Like, isn't this part of what you do? And they're like, no, not really. It's not a part of the agreement. If we have to come to the facility or come to that property, there's actually a fee. I'm like, what? I had no idea. I'm like, wait, so to come to the property, you have to manage it. It's like, what do you actually do? It's like they just manage the paperwork. If they can't do it from their desktop, then it's an extra fee. So now I'm getting upset. I'm like, wow, I had no idea that this is how it worked. So in the smaller multifamily, you really have to understand, like, what does that mean when you bring in a third party management? Because some of that stuff, I'm like, well, I feel like I could have just done some of this stuff based on what you're charging me. And it doesn't really add the kind of value I thought it was going to add. And then when you scale up, this is the big difference. So there's not a whole lot of money going around on an 8 unit. Let's just say rents are $1,000 for easy numbers. 8 units, $8,000 rents, right? And let's just say they're charging us 10%. So it's $800 is what they're making a month on this property. It's decent money, but $800 is not changing anybody's life, right? Not as a property management company. So you have to understand there's just not enough scale for it to be that profitable for them. For them to have someone dedicated to my property or showing it, once a week, walking the property, it's not going to happen. Take that and you put it on a 100-unit building. Okay, 100-unit building, $1,000. Well, guess what? Now we're talking about, 10,000. We got $100,000, right, coming through here each month. So way more money now. $100,000, 10%, that's $10,000. What they're bringing in each month now as a property management company. Well, now you can afford to pay someone full time to operate that property, to be on site at that property, to grab those circulars, throw them out, to do the showing, to do all those different things. And that's really the difference between the small multifamily and the large multifamily. You can run it like a business versus a hobby or a part-time job. And on the small stuff, it was a part-time job for me, right? Because I still had to go show up. I had to figure out how to do everything, and I had to run it myself. I had to screen the tenants. I had to interview them. I had to go through the applications. I had to do all that stuff myself. Even work at the property management company. Yes, they did a lot of it, but I paid for it. And then the stuff they didn't do, which is the small stuff that I think is still really important, right? Making sure that when someone drives by the property, the front is clean, grass has been cut properly, all that little stuff that gives the appearance of the care and nurture someone's going to get from their new home. I still kind of make sure that was happening. Otherwise, we would show, if that didn't happen, properties would sit and it'd be like 2-3 weeks. I'm like, how come we haven't got an application yet? Then I drive by and it's like, oh, well, no wonder, like this light's broken right here and there's mail piled up in the front. And so I think you really need to be kind of hands-on. And the flip of that is scale up. Scaling up allows you to hire somebody and then oversee them. And that's their only job. So now there really is no excuse for someone allowing that to happen. If mail is piling up and that person is working there, either A, they're not really working there or they're not showing up every day, or B, this person is really incompetent and doesn't know what they should be doing. So the scaling makes it easier. And then for me, now I'm an asset manager, which means I get to manage the manager. So going back to my corporate experience, that's really what I was doing, right? I'm not necessarily placing the media buys myself. I was helping understand the strategy and then letting the team members go out there and execute. Well, it's the same thing here. We're putting together a business plan. I'm talking to my team, making sure that they're able to execute that plan. We're getting feedback from the marketplace. If components of that plan aren't working or we're not getting the results we were looking for, we're able to step back and say, okay, if we're not getting the $100 rent increase for this change, then why don't we reduce our expense? Let's not put so much into it if we're not going to recoup that. So we're able to sit there and manage it from that standpoint, which is more effective for me in my time than actually going to the property, picking up trash and throwing it out.
And ballpark for you guys, where is that threshold in terms of unit counts where it makes sense to bring on somebody in-house?
I would say between 75 units and 100 units. It really just depends on the price point as well. But I would say around 75 to 100 units is when you can have kind of an on-site manager. I know some people like to get to 150 units and up. It really just comes down to the asset itself, like how much hand holding do you need. You can get like a part-time person as well. So there are different ways you can do it, but I would say probably around 75 to 100 units is where you want to have someone more on site.
So then as you work to find investors now, what's your pitch to them? Or as you started to build your database of investors, how did that message go of like, hey, we're identifying bigger buildings, we're trying to do bigger deals, come along for the ride, here's how we do it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you made that presentation and those early scaling steps to bring in more investor partners.
Well, I think the first thing is understanding what are people looking for, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
easy to tell people what you want, right? I can definitely tell them, hey, we're buying these properties and you have a chance to invest with me. But what works better is understanding what people are looking for. And our investors are, some people are like I was at that time, and I just didn't know it. But I was a busy professional. I had two young children. I had, some investments, and I liked real estate and believed in real estate. But what I didn't have was the resources to scale my portfolio the way I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And what I ended up doing was learning the hard way by trying to scale it that way, and took some lumps along the way. I did some flip projects that did not pan out and lost money on those flip projects. On the multifamily deals that we've done, we had great success. But again, a lot of it was very hands-on for me. So I spent a lot of time doing that, which meant a lot of time away from my family, and added on to the full-time day job. It was a lot of work, a lot of responsibility. If I could go back, what I would do is what I tell people to do now: invest passively. That way you get all the benefits of investing in real estate without the headaches of being a landlord. Now, there's still risk involved, but you're going to invest with someone who has more experience than you do. You're going to invest in someone who has resources, has invested the time and energy to create team systems, processes, relationships, and the scale. Again, if you're buying a 100, 200 unit building, well, now you have something large enough to have property management on staff. You buy a 3-unit building, you bought yourself a part-time job. And for someone who is looking to get financial freedom or time flexibility, you really have to think about the investment and what that investment is going to cost you, not just financially, but time wise. And
Mm-hmm.
most people don't. And going back to me, it's like when I started investing, I didn't really understand that concept of working with other people. And I really did think you had to do it all by yourself. And I remember there was a Saturday afternoon, we had a unit turn at our 3-unit property, and I got quoted like $800 to paint the unit. I'm like, y'all are out your mind. I'm not paying $800 to paint this unit. I'll do it myself, right? And I was like, without the paint, that was just like their labor. I was
Yep.
like, I'll go buy the paint myself and do it. Well, I took a long time to paint. So I, from priming the walls, prepping them, washing them, all that stuff. I think I started like 8:30. About 2 o'clock, my wife called me and said, well, I'm taking our son to the park. When do you think he'll be done? And I'm like, babe, I just did the first coat. Like I gotta wait for this. I'm literally waiting for paint to dry, and then
Mm-hmm.
I gotta do another coat. And I just sat there like, dude, you spent your whole Saturday in this summer. You tell yourself that you're doing all this for your family, right? But your family is going to the park, and you've been at this apartment all day on a Saturday. For a busy professional who works full-time job, you only get 2 days to be with your family and kind of create your own life anyway. And you're spending one of those days, doing a part-time job. Stop lying to yourself. You got a
Mm-hmm.
part-time job. That's what you have.
Yep.
You could pay somebody, but you didn't want to pay the $800 because you didn't think it was, worth it. So here you are sitting in a hot ass apartment, waiting on paint to dry. And I just remember sitting in that room like, wow, this is crazy. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but we need to go back and look at the numbers, and I need to make sure this is included moving forward. So like I'm planning on paying this kind of money for unit turns. But that was my aha moment, right? Sitting there watching the paint dry and recognizing that this really wasn't a passive investment. And if I would have known that I could have invested 50K or 100K with a group who had the resources to paint, and I could spend my Saturdays with my son and make those memories, especially when you talk about Chicago, you talk about Chicago summer. So 90 days, what you're talking 24 days basically of weekends, right? Of warm
Mm-hmm.
weather weekends in Chicago. 24 days is what we got, really. 24 days. And I spent one of them waiting on paint to dry. And it's like, never again. Like, you have to really think about your time from that standpoint. And it's easy. I mean, we all want to save money, right? We're investors, we're entrepreneurs, is part of it. But you also have to be very diligent on how you do it. And I think that was the mistake I made. And I tell anyone, hey, if you want to scale, look for people that you can invest in. Because if you love it, then you can do more of that.
Yep.
You can scale. You're going to gain more experience. You got a new resource you could talk to. I mean, my investors call me all the time. Hey, man, I'm looking at this deal. It's not even real estate sometimes, but they want to bounce stuff off because we now have that relationship and they respect my opinion, right? And that's what I would strongly suggest someone do is like invest passively with a group, unless you want to just be a full-time real estate investor. But most people don't. They just want the benefits real estate has to offer. So think about that and just make sure you're investing your time and your money the way you want.
Yeah. Yeah, it hits home for me too. We had taken on a flip project, and we had two other people on my team that had done it. And we hired out the things that we needed to, the plumbing, the electrical, kind of the key stuff. I was a framer in college, so I could frame a basement. That was kind of my skill set. And we didn't plan ahead far enough for mudding and taping to have somebody do that for us. And so we got stuck mudding and taping and then painting. And man, talk about one Saturday. That was multiple Saturdays and Sundays, nights, you name it. And like you said, the whole goal was we're doing this for our family. I spent more time away from my kids. I spent more time away from, and even too, just, the household duties of, keeping up on the house. Now my wife has to do all that on the weekends that I'm gone. I would sometimes put the kids to bed at 9 p.m., go to the house and work till 2 a.m., come home, sleep till 7 at best, and turn around and do it again. And it's like, what I realize is I don't ever want to do this again. I want to be able to do this passively versus, and we just didn't plan ahead. And I'm sure you can get better as you flip homes, and plan ahead on those things. But, that to me was kind of the breaking point of let's do this more passively here versus, I'm doing it for my family. And what's happening is I'm spending way more time away from my family than I thought I was going to gain back,
Yeah. And to build on that, we did some flip projects and my flips went terribly bad. Right. And part of it was I was smart enough and I had the foresight to recognize that I didn't want to be a flipper. So I partner with other flippers, right? Partner with guys who are like quasi developers, flippers. And the reality is that they didn't pan out. And on two of the projects, I ended up having to take over and finish the projects myself. And that cost us a lot of money because I pretty much had to start over on some of the work. But the bigger thing though, and the lesson here for all your listeners is the professionalism of the people you're working with. Because if you're flipping, or again, you got a 2-unit or 3-unit, well, you only have so much money you can pay someone, right, to do a job. You got your margins. Your margins are going to be kind of tight, So when you're flipping, you're racing the clock, you're racing your budget. So you got to get people who are willing to do the work in those parameters. And those people tend to be less reliable. They have stuff just happen in their lives. Let me ask you this. Anybody who's a flipper or own real estate, in the last year or two, have you had contractors or vendors call you and cancel because of COVID? Their mom got COVID or someone in their family got COVID. Someone passed away and they had to go to the funeral. And I'm not saying these things don't happen, but I've had my quote unquote reliable guys hit me with, 4 or 5 of these every single time. Car issues, car breaking down, my truck's not working. I'm like, one guy, I'm like, dude, you hit that excuse to me 2 weeks ago. You've got to rotate. Like they just keep rotating these excuses, right? Now, if you go to the higher end companies or you go to these bigger companies, I'm not necessarily saying more expensive, but companies that have, employees and a better track record, you don't have these same issues run up, right? When you're sitting there waiting on it, you don't have a guy call you while you're at the property waiting for him to tell you, oh, I can't make it today because my car broke down, or sorry, man, I got, my wife got COVID, so we can't be there tomorrow. I was getting this over and over and over, right? On my bigger stuff, we don't have that happen, right? Because guess what? If someone does have a life situation happen, there's someone else, right? Or they have the professionalism to call to say, hey, I can't be there today for this issue. I can't be there tomorrow. I'm going to come by tomorrow. Is that okay? So that communication to me is key. Again, I come from corporate America where if you say you're going to do something, you do it, right? Like there's no back and forth. And the thing I've learned is when you're flipping or you're buying smaller properties, you're really more in a blue collar type area. So it's not corporate, it's not white collar. And in blue collar, you kind of have to force people to do it. You got to force them to show up. You got to almost be on the site watching them work. or they will cut corners as much as they can. And it's a different mindset. And again, most business professionals don't really understand that aspect of it. So when they get into these deals, they think they're going to make all this money and they think it's going to be easy and it's passive. And they realize it's not. They're doing a lot of hand holding and they're not making the money they're going to make. And these contractors are going slow and they're milking them and taking advantage of them. And it's not the outcome they're looking for. And unfortunately, they either lose money or they don't make what they thought they were going to make. And now real estate becomes kind of a bad investment to them or something they're less interested in, when in reality, they needed to partner with a group that could run in a more professional manner and allow them to get the scale and resources that you really need to be successful.
So chatting quick then about market selection or, state selection, you've got investments in multiple states. Walk me through how you guys decided where you wanted to go. I mean, how much of it is driven by you? How much is driven by investors, maybe their location or what's available, but walk through, because otherwise, you can spend your time analyzing the whole United States. So walk me through, how do we narrow it down to the best investments that you guys can find?
Yeah, listen, man, that's a great question. When I launched my podcast, it was called Target Market Insights. It now is called Multifamily Insights. But it was born with the idea of this was going to show you how to find the best places to invest, because I had that same question. And for me, I was living in Chicago and I knew I wanted to invest outside of Chicago because the numbers stopped working. And I landed kind of on Cincinnati, but I wasn't completely sold. And I was just trying to figure out, okay, even if I pick Cincinnati, where in Cincinnati? Like, I don't know the city that well. And for me, I would say it's a combination of a couple of things. One, you always want to understand where people are going. So you're looking at population, you're looking at jobs, and you're trying to understand where the puck is going, right? Where are the demographic trends headed? So that's something we're paying a lot of attention to. Something that is a little less stated, but kind of obvious when you step back and think about it. Where do you have a competitive advantage? Where does it make sense for you to invest? So I would go and look at these top 10 lists, right? Like I go and pull up IRR has a great list. Marcus and Millichap does a great list every year. There's a few others that do a great list of like top places to invest, or they rank cities. And I would go look at them. Well, guess what? Some of these cities I've never even been to. Like there's no reason for me to invest in Utah. Not a knock on Utah, but John Casmon has no competitive advantage in Utah. I don't know the brokers there. I've never traveled there. I don't know anything about Utah that would make me a better Utah investor than someone else. But when you think about Ohio, well, I'm born and raised in Cleveland. I went to school in Dayton. I live in Cincinnati now. My wife is from Cincinnati. Okay, I might know a thing or two about this market, right? I can talk to some people. I can call some people. I've got some resources in that market. I lived in Chicago for 8 years. I've lived in Detroit for 4 years. There's certain markets where I have a competitive advantage. So I try to take that, markets I'm familiar with, market I have some knowledge with, and other markets in the Southeast that I travel to a lot and have some competitive advantages with as well. But I take that and then combine it with what the data is telling me. But it really comes down to data and then also relationships. If I don't have key partners in these markets that I trust and I know that they know the market really well, then we're not going to consider it. So for us, it comes down to, I want to look at the demographic information. I want to look at the partners, relationships we have, and we use that to inform which markets we invest in.
And for you then, now I think I listed a few early on, but where are you guys marketing to, or where are you looking in?
Yeah, so we have stuff in Kentucky. So we like Northern Kentucky a lot, Louisville, Indianapolis. So for me, we have basically a two-pronged approach. Markets where it's a 2-hour drive radius from where I'm at. So think Indianapolis, Columbus, Louisville, Lexington, Kentucky. Those are the markets where I'm focused. But we also partner with other operators in the Southeast region. So Atlanta, Georgia, Carolinas, parts of Florida. And then we've owned some stuff in Texas as well. You want to take action no matter what. If you're looking to scale your portfolio, figure out the next logical step to scale. What's holding you back? What's the issue you face? And how do you overcome that obstacle? If it helps, we do have a sample deal package on our website. And I think it's helpful if you are either looking to do your own syndication deals or maybe raise capital and put stuff together, if you want to figure out what you should be communicating, or if you're on the other side of that and you're interested in investing passively, but you don't know what to look for in a deal yet, or what a deal structure should be and what's a fair amount of equity. So take a look at that. You can take a look at how the deal is structured and some of the information in there, and we'll get some follow-up communications, get you added to our email list, and be happy to share more information from there. CasmonCapital.com/sample deal.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, John, for coming on and sharing your wisdom. We covered a lot. There's so much more we could have covered in the future. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experience with others. It was fantastic.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.